0.065 paren 2 paren E states that the School Board of Sarasota County, Florida will soon consider a budget for 2020-2021. A public hearing to make a decision on the budget and taxes will be held on July 28th, 2020 at 1980 Landings Boulevard, Sarasota, Florida. During such discussion, the governing body shall hear comments regarding the proposed millage rate. The general public shall be allowed to speak and to ask questions prior to the adoption of any measures by the governing body. The governing body shall adopt its tentative or final millage rate prior to adopting its tentative or final budget. Please stand for a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Corcoran, presentation of the Superintendent's tentative budget, please.
So good afternoon. First, happy birthday, Bridget. The budget lady, or the budget guru, Krista Kurtner, is here, and she's going to kind of walk you guys all through the budget that we've presented. I don't know, I'm sure you all have noticed that the budget document looks very different from the 3 ring binders we've received in the past, and I need to congratulate all of the hard work and effort of the part of the budget team to get this done. This format is the format that's used by GFOA. It's a standardized format used throughout the country. And it is our plan when our final budget is done to submit it to both GFOA and ASBO, similar to our financial statement document, for review, comment, and hopefully an award. So go ahead, Krista.
So we'll start with the budget as opposed to the millage. Is that correct?
When you want to.
Would you like to start with the budget or the millage information?
We can start with the millage.
Millage, okay. So in the agenda information, you will see that the 2020 proposed millage rate is listed. This information came on Friday with the second calculation of the FEFP, and it is general required local effort of 3.727. Of that number, 3.711 was the actual millage rate, and 0.016 was a prior period adjustment. None of the other millage rates have changed, but the total millage rate came in for 6.975. Also, you'll see up at the top of number 3 that the certified tax roll came in at $69 billion, which represented a 4.88% increase from the 2019. The proposed millage rate required by state law is 3.10% more than last year's rollback millage rate. And when all local millage levies are included, the proposed millage rate is 2.68% more than last year's rollback rate.
So during the legislature, the conference report that was issued was, it showed actually that our millage rate was not going to increase because they estimated a total property value increase of close to 6%. Our property values on our final certification came in at 4.8%. So to generate that same revenue that's included in the FEFP, it actually ended up being an increase over last year's required local effort millage rate. So that's what the big difference is.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can talk about the budget if you're ready.
Ready.
So we'll go to the budget document and start with the executive summary. And it starts out talking about how, on page 1, how our FTE was submitted back in January of this year for the 2020 budget year. And it was supposed to be increased by 491 unweighted FTE. So that's what we have been working with at this point in time. The overall, on page 3, the overall appropriations budget for the district funds is $964 million, approximately. And on page 4, you can see how the revenues are coming in. The pie chart shows you that 41% of the revenues are property taxes. So that's the largest portion of our revenues. On page,
Excuse me.
I apologize.
You know, people always say you've got a $964 million budget, and, you know, no, we're often looking at that budget summary of $503 million. How does it go from 500 to 900?
So if you want to look at page 6 and 7. On page 6, you'll see the total appropriations by the funds. So the 503 that you're speaking of is the general fund, and then the balance of the other funds make up that difference, including fund balance.
So that includes fund balances?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So then on page 7, you will see the total fund summary. So this breaks down each of the funds and by the function that the budget is going to be is estimated. This is also an example of one of the ads that's going to be, with your approval, advertised this weekend in the paper. On page 8, it shows the appropriations chart broken down by overall funds by object code. And as you can see in that one, the largest object is salaries, $311 million. And then on page 10, the appropriations by function for all funds is broken down by function. And the largest function overall is instruction by $356 million. And then on page 11 is the fund balance pie charts. The top one is the beginning, estimated beginning for 2021, and then the bottom one is the estimated end. Page 12 talks about the enrollment numbers. What I spoke about in the beginning of the book was the FTE, which is different than enrollment. It's closely related, but it's not the same number. And this was, again, built upon our projections in January. And it was showing a growth overall district-wide of 677 students, of which most of which was going to be budgeted for our Florida Family Empowerment Scholarship. Should we find that that is not as large as we anticipate, then obviously if the students go into our classrooms, that's when then we'll be able to move those funds to our schools. Did you all want me to go into the general fund? No.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes? Okay.
Is she still talking?
I'm sorry, yeah, I'm moving.
Yes.
To general fund? Did you want to talk about general fund?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Yes? Okay, so on page 25 of the general fund is the overall fund summary. And on that page are the revenues for the general fund, the federal, state, and local sources, which you have been hearing throughout the last few months is basically the ESE scholarships, which is also the Florida Family Empowerment Scholarships. So we'll just change that to just scholarships has increased. Our estimation has increased for what's going to be going out.
Caroline, I have a question on that.
Go ahead.
So that shows that those ESE scholarships and the Family Empower scholarships funds are reduced by $6,240,000. Could you maybe explain what the minus on the FEFP is?
So that
Perhaps Metzi.
Sure. I mean, I can explain. So the way it is we list all of the categorical items in the state funding. And because we are a 90% locally funded school district, we levy a required local effort millage. So when you add them all together, it works out to more than the total of the FEFP. So we show the top part as the differential or the negative.
So basically we're getting the money in the categoricals, not in the base student allocation
Correct.
formula.
That would, you would, as a 90% funded district and separating out the categoricals.
Thank you.
That would be it.
And so down in the local sources is where you will see our referendum, the voted school tax, coming in at a little over 66 million as an estimated, and that's based upon a 4.88% increase in property, the tax roll. On page 26 are the appropriations for the general fund based upon function. And just to kind of go over things that we've talked about before, but the summary of it is the salaries are increasing based upon the teacher salary increase allocation, and the aides, how we've increased their days. The employee benefits are increasing mainly because of FRS, and there's an increase in medical. The purchase services are actually going down by the district, because the rekeying project was an initiative for 1920. The purchase services for charter schools is going to come in around 60 million, which represents about 12% of our overall appropriations.
I'm not seeing purchase services on page 26.
It's not. The page 26 gives you the expenditures by the functional components that they represent. It's not by the object code. So it's not the type of expense, it's how the money's being spent. We will need to add that into the document for the final budget. Right now we do this. This is what's required by the state, is by function, and so that's why it's in here. But we will provide you one by object.
On page 31 is a chart by objects. If you wanted to go there, it kind of breaks it out.
The chart's there, but no
Yeah.
dollar amounts are there.
Correct, yes, and I'll make sure I have the table that generates
Thank
the
you.
chart. Absolutely, yep. We have that in our notes for final. So the charters represent about 60 million. So you can see in that chart on page 31, it's the third largest of the sections of the appropriations. And this was obviously status quo roll forward budget as far as things that were added were based upon the teacher salary increase. One of the things that did get added to the budget as of the last time we spoke was the 5 extra duty days that you wanted to see. And there's also an increase in for masks. So there was some consumable increase as well.
PPE.
Yes, the PPE.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. And then if you turn the page 32 is again by the functions, which is broken down the chart. And then on page 33 is the fund balance for estimated fund balance for general fund for 1920 and then for 2021. And both of those are based upon the new way to calculate the ending financial condition ratio. So that's at 8.47 estimated for next year. Or this year, I'm sorry. So do you have any questions?
I
So
don't see.
the only other modifications that were made to the overall budget document were in the capital projects based upon the discussions on the 14th. The Gosio project was rolled into debt service, and that included the funding. We hadn't begun that project, correct, Jody? We have not even started that project yet. So we took the 1920 funding and the 2021 funding for the Gosio project, rolled that into the COPS borrowing, and then added in the full Booker High School VPA project into the 5-year capital plan.
Did you say the full Booker project?
Yes, if you go to
For 2 years.
page,
Over 2 years, okay, thank you.
over 2 years, yes, year 2021, and then the black box theaters in 21-22. And that's the only change from the 14th. Are there any questions?
So Northport High School have HVAC and science construction. Is that a building, the science construction? I understand HVAC, but when you say science construction, is that a building?
No,
That's not for student stations?
it's already existing student stations. We're renovating them.
Okay. always looking for new student stations. Mrs. Ziegler?
Thank you. Well, first, thank you for this. I love the format. I know years ago when I started to really dive into our budgets, the way in which it was outlined made it much more complicated. And not that this is simple, but this is a much more user-friendly. So I really appreciate the work you guys have done, and I hope that from the community standpoint, it's almost also helpful for them to see. I have a question, and thank you for addressing, I know we spoke earlier. So the 5.6 million estimation for the additional week of planning for, and I'm sorry if it's extra duty days, I'm not sure what the proper language is to utilize. That is reflected in this budget, that's correct?
It is reflected in the budget.
And then the other question I had was, and I apologize if I didn't see it, there was additional increase on consumables. Is that broken down? Do we know what that estimation is? I know that's needed, so I don't want
But
that.
the consumables would be PPE.
Right, no, that's what I said for the PPE. Is that outlined specifically?
It's not identified specifically in the budget.
Do we have just a broad, I'm just trying to get an estimation of what that cost looked like. And again, I know we need it, so.
Well, I would say by the time it's all said and done, we'll have spent probably close to $2 million on PPE, but I'd have to get you the exact
No worries.
numbers.
No,
We're
it's
still
just an
ordering
estimation.
stuff,
so we had to increase it roughly to $2 million as best we can project a very unknown situation, and that's for staff and students.
yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, what's in it, this one only went up about like $500,000 because we were still purchasing things. So you'll probably see an increase in the overall once we have an actual estimate closer to in the final. So that was all it went up at that point. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Say that again. So this is reflecting
About 500,000.
increase, but you predict it would go up.
Yes, based upon it's
Because of the change to the student, basically because you have a mandatory mask policy now, then we have to provide masks to our students who can't provide them on their own.
Naturally.
And so that is the piece that we're still trying to, I think it was just today, we were kind of trying to narrow down what that number might be to order, because we know it's not going to be for every student, and then what percentage would need shields. So we're still working through that, but that will be, and we'll bring a budget amendment to
Right. So again, and thank you for that clarification, because I think that just kind of goes to my point of, there are so many unknowns, but that's a perfect example. It's a $500,000 increase, but we do predict potentially, which isn't reflected, the 500,000 is reflected, but potentially it could go as high as 2 million. Again, not reflected because we're working through it. And being conservative of all of these unknowns when we talk about our fund balance and how we move forward. So I appreciate you highlighting that. I just wanted to clarify that, the 5.6 is reflected here, and the additional there are likely additional expenditures, which in any year there would be, but this year is probably more than ever. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And we have actually reached out to Florida Department of Emergency Management to find out if it's possible to make claims to FEMA. Normally you wait until the very end because they're usually hurricane kind of claims. And so you submit everything all at once. This is going to be kind of ongoing for a long period of time. So we've made the request to find out, can we submit for reimbursement on multiple occasions? And so that has gone up the chain, and we're still waiting on an answer. So, if we are able to submit on multiple occasions, we may see money coming back maybe a little more quickly, which would be wonderful. So,
Mrs. Brown?
On that point, when we were on the FSBA call with the emergency management a couple of weeks ago, they said that we could actually pre-submit. I don't know, but perhaps you can check with them too. I have a couple of questions on some things that might affect the budget going forward, and that will be the students. How many students come back and under what way they come back. I think there was some confusion. I know there is around the people out there, the parents out there are confused about it and how the different ones are. But I think we as board members have to be cautious when we're telling people to go to virtual school so that they understand what we're talking about, because the remote learning that we're talking about is going to be given by teachers, and it's going to follow the coursework. And yes, it's going to be several hours. I mean, because this isn't what we did before. I mean, they're going to have to be learning new content. Doesn't necessarily mean that the student will be in front of the computer the whole time. They might have other projects that they have to do, just like now students, are off to their side doing different things. So they won't necessarily be in front of the computer for 5 straight hours. But if they go to the Sarasota Virtual School, for one, they will be withdrawn from their school of choice or their district school, and that's a totally different type of education.
Absolutely.
And taught by a different school, different teacher, not the one. So it'll be harder for them, those children, to integrate back into their classroom when they want to transition, after the vaccine comes out or this mysteriously disappears. Florida virtual. Oh, and also, you might want to explain how we get funded when we go to virtual. And then if they go to Florida virtual, they actually withdraw from the whole district.
Correct.
And that doesn't necessarily match up with what we're doing. It'll be even harder for them to integrate or transition back into the classroom later on. But there's really strict financial implications to us. I mean, say if just 400 students go to Sarasota virtual versus remote learning, I mean, that's $1 million hit to us, because I understand it's like $2,500 less. I mean, and it could potentially be more because it's only paid on completion.
That's a true statement. We are only paid or only receive the FEFP funding for virtual students when they successfully complete. So if they do not successfully complete, we do not receive any funding. And that's for both the contracted virtual and the Sarasota virtual. Then, and yes, the funding per student is less because we wouldn't receive any transportation funding because they're not taking a bus. We wouldn't necessarily receive, I'm trying to think of what the other supplemental academic instruction dollars. There's certain dollars within the FEFP categoricals that you don't receive, and I would guess you don't receive class size funding.
But some parents were saying they wanted that because it's not that straight, they can come and they can go, and it's not those 5 hours. But it's also more self-directed, correct? I mean, they're not going to have the one-on-one with the teacher.
It's absolutely self-directed, and if you do not make adequate progress through the course, on the time through the pacing guide, they could disenroll you from the class. They will contact you, but actually, my daughter attended Florida Virtual School back in the day when it was in its infancy, and you got to talk to the teacher once a month, and then the teacher usually had office hours that the kid could try to interrelate with the teacher, but it was absolutely self-directed. You have to be very disciplined to follow that curriculum and do it. It's very self-driven course.
And it's not really appropriate for elementary either, would it be? Or?
Well, it depends on your child.
I mean, the parent would have to spend a lot of time.
And their situation, yes, absolutely. So it's very much more. I will say it's very self-driven. But if you have a very self-motivated, driven child, they can be quite successful at it. And the transition, I will tell you, she transitioned in her junior year. The transition is rather difficult because you have to modify a lot of things. So, but it's up to the parent and the student and what they want to choose to do. For us, that just means it's not a teacher. It's a Sarasota Virtual Academy student. It will be a Sarasota School District teacher. So. But yes, there is less funding that comes into the district to support,
I was
those students.
Talking to Mr. Asplin, our new superintendent, about it, and he said what they do in their district is they assign more students to those teachers because obviously they get less money, and you can't have the same student ratio. And I think we got into that conversation because he had talked to Hillsborough County, who was talking about going to all online learning, and he said that Hillsborough was told that if they go to all online learning and do not open brick and mortar, they will fund them all as if they were in their local virtual school, which means they were going to cut all that funding. They're not going to get the busing. They're not going to get this. So it would be a big hit on the district. And people are saying, well, how can they withhold the money? That's one of the ways they can withhold the money, because they're saying you're not giving them the full educational experience that you should, that we're paying you for.
That's true. That was my understanding also, that Hillsborough's plan was not approved, or if they continued with the plan that they had, that they would be funded differently. That's my understanding also.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Thank you. Well, but I think what Mrs. Brown just touched on is, I mean, there's, from a high level, there's a lot of, that highlights or underscores a lot of the unknowns. And so even the question I said is, we look ahead, and we were talking about the PPE, which in my mind is somewhat more simple comparably to the enrollment, potential, the volatility there. And so when I look I know that this is our starting point, and by the way, I do want to add a kudos to your entire team, because I know that these numbers came in very late, and again, in combination with the incredible unknown. So I do really want to thank you for all of that work. As we move forward, so I have some concerns on our fund balance with the unknown. So, and I think that's clear that I've said that before. But if you, as far as how these, especially on enrollment, and again, thank you to our team who did the surveys. Again, that's intended to directly give us some sense. And I'm actually very impressed with how many we got back. But there is that element of, we had Sarasota virtual as an option, which could also have been intended to be Florida virtual, but it could very well be, that there are a percentage, and I don't think it's of the ones that did not respond. I don't think that would equate to, okay, they're going somewhere else. But if we have any gauge as to how many families will opt completely out of, will pivot over to a homeschooling environment or private school, and because we're utilizing our enrollment numbers as best we can based on past historical data, right? So, and we know that that's going to be potentially very different. As we move forward, and we won't know, I mean, no one has that crystal ball that we continue to talk about. Talk to me about the budget amendments that we would expect to see in that time frame, because that could very dramatically change. I mean, like I said, PPE is not inexpensive, 1.5 million differentials, not just a drop in the bucket. But when we're talking about, even with the scenario that Mrs. Brown brought up, if it's 100 or a couple hundred, I mean, we're talking millions of dollars that we would have to impact. And I know a lot of that goes into staffing, but it could trickle into a couple other areas. From a broad, I'm not asking you to have those answers as to what that looks like, but as this board prepares from a financial discussion and preparing to pivot, what would that look like, and how frequently would we potentially be looking at budget amendments, if you could help us with that?
Okay, so it was a lot, but I think I got it. Yeah. Ultimately, what we're hoping to do is on the 4th, we're hoping to get to a general idea of what choices have been made outside of the choices we gave. So we have seen a slight uptick on the number of homeschooled students. So I've had a conversation with Dr. Cantalupo on, can we get a comparison to see what we're looking at, because those are students we have built in to our enrollment number that now will not be there. And we go through this pretty large exercise at the start of every school year when we open. And schools are doing this where they're holding back units that they've been allotted because they're not sure if their students are going to come in. And I know that Krista's been working very, very closely with the folks in state reporting as students are registering. She's talked with Dawn Stout too. So they're monitoring. So right now we're seeing like a school seems like they're getting a bunch more students. Well, that's kind of interesting. But then there's another school that's kind of offsetting that with a reduced amount of enrollment. So we're
these are our district schools. Okay.
Yes. So we're kind of monitoring all of that all the time right now. And then the budget team is on the phone with the principals all the time talking about their enrollment. We're seeing that you're coming in a lot lower, or more often than not, I have more kids, I need more teachers. Well, so it could be that your students are coming from somewhere else, and that at 5-day count, we do a bit of a shuffle to realign the teachers. But our 5-day count is actually, to me, our opportunity to make sure we are not overstaffing our schools. At that point, we know who is or isn't coming in. We don't know exactly, because a lot of times we'll have kids who will come in a bit later, but we have prior trending, which isn't really going to be very useful this year, but to get a general idea of what the actual student enrollment would be normally during an October survey. So we will do that and make adjustments accordingly. And to me, the first thing, once we get past that 5-day window and have our school staffed, is when we have to institute a hiring freeze. And we are going to have to monitor every request for a unit coming in to our schools to make sure that the need is warranted, because I will tell you, during the recession, that was the way we survived, was through a hard hiring freeze. And so to me, that would be, did you find it? Oh, okay. So what was the savings? So we had back during the recession, Al Widener used to keep a running tally of all of our cost avoidance or our savings and stuff. And there was savings from the hiring freeze.
So Mitzi asked me to look for historical information. This one was from the budget reductions 2007-2008 year, and it states that a mid-year hiring freeze was implemented. A total of 5,197 positions were in the original budget, and the end of the year, 4,951 were filled. And as a result of them not filling them with permanent employees but substitutes, the savings was $4 million.
So that's a mid-year. So given what we potentially could have for a full year, and the average salaries are a little bit higher now, it could potentially save us money. So to me, we are an 85% salary and benefit driven business. We are a people business. So I think that would be one of the ways we could help with that. But again, once you make the decision and this becomes the student's teacher, once you get beyond that period of time, so say Labor Day, or now it'll be after Labor Day, but instructionally, it's not good to just start moving teachers around and having kids lose their teacher other than when the teacher leaves the school or, goes out on a leave. So to me, that's kind of where we kind of draw the line in the sand. And then the only way to do it after that is to just not fill.
Thank you. And just for, as a follow-up with that, I think I was looking at it from a financial standpoint, but recognize there's, again, so much volatility, even when we think about our staff, and not wanting to short it too much where it absolutely hurts us. And so there's that balance. I'm just looking at it from our end when we talk about other areas in the budget to offset as much as we can, even though, to your point, 85% is around salary and benefits. And that's really where, I was curious how we're going to be having those conversations. I know at the staffing level, but is the budget amendments coming back to the board to make those decisions, and the frequency of which in general, because sometimes they happen a little bit later when we adjust?
So normally we bring budget adjustments when we have a new calculation of the FEFP. And normally we don't bring a budget adjustment if we're reducing or making savings. So, one of the things that is included in this budget that we could potentially modify for the final, out-of-county travel. So, that seems like really low-hanging fruit in my opinion as far as a budget item. It's in the budget. It's a few $100,000. I mean, there's travel that occurs that's tied to grant funding because it's required by grants. That's a different story. I'm talking about general fund, just general revenue. So to me, I think, more people are meeting. Well, nobody's having meetings right now anyway, really in person. But even if they got to that point, I think we've kind of come to a point now where we can do things over Teams or over Zoom. So to me, that seems like a pretty easy item to kind of sweep aside out of the budget and just hold in abeyance until things may get better or not. So it basically doesn't come out of the budget, you just can't spend it. And you certainly can't move it to another line item in the budget to spend it, so.
Mrs. Goodwin?
And if you don't take it out of the budget, that's good for next year. If things change, then you still have that line item in the budget. I know one year we took out lobbyists, and it took us quite a few years to get it back in the budget. So we have 67% of our parents who have replied who said they want their children to come back to school.
Correct.
And that's 67% of what?
Of the respondents.
Yes,
So-
but I mean, how many respondents? How many?
24.
How many kids do we not know what they're doing yet?
It was a little bit more than half who responded. 53%.
It's about 54% respondent rate in total based on students. Obviously, there are more families.
Right.
More
and
students to a
and
family. But.
Right, that's true. And the schools have that information,
Yeah.
and they are
Working
reaching
on
out. So while we said if you don't respond, the assumption is your brick and mortar, the schools are still reaching out. But they have to get to a point where they just, if they can't get in touch with you, I mean, there's only so much time they can spend. They have to start planning for the new school year.
Okay. So, we'll adjust all of our numbers accordingly when we find out what is the true number.
Right.
So we had
if it were to
44,000 or so.
Right. If that was that it's a really good sample size. So if you were to say that, 93% of your students are coming back in some form, either in person or remote, you can do your staffing and your scheduling, I think.
I've looked at several other districts, and some of them had quite a number of people that were going to homeschool or Florida virtual, and or someplace else. So I'm hoping that won't be the case with our students, because I think it's so much easier for them to stay with us and remain flexible as to what happens. But yeah, I have some concerns about that. Has it? I seem to think our emails have gotten down a little bit. Are we seeing that?
Communications has done a really good job. Yay to communications to respond and update the FAQs. And so, yeah, I mean, I will say your emails are going down. Tori answered 250? 400, I apologize, 450 questions on social media. So they're still answering questions and keeping busy.
Well, and it looks, and a nice job, very, very nice job, Craig. Congratulations. Tell your people that they're doing a good job. From what I've gathered, they seem to be right there. And I think that's good, because we want to make sure we get the answers, because people are frightened, and we want to make sure we have the right answers. So thank you for that.
Great.
Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, thank you very much, because like Ms. Brown was saying, that if we have too many people going to virtual, it could be financially devastating for our district for years to come. We may never recover from that. And but I agree with Ms. Ziegler about wanting to be up to date about budget amendments, because although you may not get budget amendments when there's cost savings, I think there's going to be some unintended costs, and just make sure, just like we just talked about, communicating with the public, communicating with the school board is also very helpful. And Krista, budget lady, associate CFO, great job. I know it takes a team to do this, so if you could please bring a message back to your team how much we appreciate all the hard work they did for the budget. Thank you.
Mrs. Brown?
I still would like to see an informational sheet that compares returning to the classroom, the remote learning, and then the differences with the, basically you have to withdraw from your school to do the Sarasota virtual, and this is what you can expect, and this is what you get with virtual. You're withdrawing from our district and the funds, and that, and and then, like if you're going to be home, and then let them know what the ramifications are and how it'll be much more easier to transition back into their classroom. I mean, because I think, I know that, I even heard last night, I think a board member misunderstanding the difference between the remote learning and the virtual. To use that word, interchangeably, too many people have done that. And there's just too many people out there that don't understand the difference between what we're calling the remote and what you're going to get in the virtual, because I just don't think they understand.
I believe there is a graphic. We have a graphic that's included. It's on the website. It lists each of the 3 different types of schooling. It was included as an appendices.
Yeah, I saw it, and I saw that it was, I thought it...
I don't know that I would want to put out what the potential consequences of making a choice are, because it may not be that it's again, I want you to stay in our school district. Absolutely. Do I think that's the best option?
No,
absolutely.
But I think they need to know that if they're withdrawing from the school district if they do that.
But they would be. Steve Pasilovich and Sarasota Virtual and all of the virtual programs, we've had so much interest. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of people have been interested in this. Congrats and kudos to him, because he has had to work with them one-on-one and try to walk them all through the process. And once they know what the full amount of, he makes sure they're fully informed before they make that decision.
Oh, good. That's what I want to make sure that they're informed. Thank you.
Because the ones who are making that decision are eyes wide open. They know what is expected of them. So they're, And he's done a really good job of, kind of telling them every step of the way what the expectations are going to be. And so we find that a lot of people who say, that's what I want, it isn't what they want. And then they end up choosing remote more than likely, is my guess.
Yeah, well, and I just know that a lot of them didn't get to the very last page of that. They didn't want to go through all that, but, okay, thank you.
But yeah, making the virtual option sends them to Steve Pasilovich, and they go through the entire.
Thank you.
Before I move on, I would like to tell you thank you for the way this new budget is. Had this been like this years ago, I wouldn't have had to spend almost a year taking a governmental budgeting course when I first came on the board to make sure that I knew what the heck I was reading. Because it's totally different than like my husband was a CPA. He couldn't read our budget. So it's really as much nicer, easier to read. So I thank you. You've done an excellent job in this. And it's just so concise. I really like it. You've done a great job. So thank you.
Thank you as the team. Thank you.
Yeah, and just as an FYI, this checks the box off of an MGT study recommendation on the budget document from a long time ago. So
I remember that.
So just wanted to, yeah.
Thank you. Mrs. Ziegler.
Thank you. I can't reiterate about the communication. I know I said that to your team, and I really do appreciate it. I think it's helped tremendously, and I think it's evidenced by the emails, there's less, but there's still more, and I know you guys are updating it regularly. Something Mrs. Brown just touched upon is certainly an outstanding question, and anytime we can forward people to the FAQs to help, there is a lot of information in there, but that's many of the questions we're getting. But I do believe there is somewhat still of an unknown, or some misunderstanding about, if option 1, 2, and 3, 1 being brick and mortar, 2 being distance learning at your registered school, and then 3 being a virtual function, SVS, FLVS, and that would, particularly as it pertains to any choice option that you're in, would remove that. That's the only thing that I still think, and I know the answers are out there, but if anyone's listening, that's definitely somewhere that that is still confusion about that. I was just going to say, if we do any kind of video or something like that, because there are about 5 questions that can't come up, and they're not ones there are some that we're still working out, but those I think are pretty absolute, and so I think that would be helpful. So it's great to hear.
So just really quick.
Yeah.
So just one thing to kind of, in my mind, the way it's easy to understand is remote learning, you're still at your school.
Just not physically there.
Correct. Virtual school is a choice option. So now, even if you've choiced to a school, you've now made a different choice. So you would have to go through the whole choice process again, when it opens, to be able to go back to another choice, because you're literally, whether it was your choice school or your districted school, you're no longer making that choice, and you're making a choice for a virtual school. So that would be why you wouldn't be able to go back to if you had a choice option earlier, because you've changed your choice, I guess.
No, and I understand. Yeah, exactly. And I think, as we dive in closer, and I know the necessity to get it out to the school so we could staff, because there's just such a limitation on time, even with the extended time.
Correct.
But having a little bit more insight into of the population that didn't respond, where they may be going if it's outside of those 3 options, because I do believe there is. Yeah. I don't know if it's substantial, but there is certainly an uptick on private school and homeschooling and what have you. But the 2 other things are the time frame of changing those options. And I know I had sent an email over to Craig earlier, and I thank you for that answer. I know it's in the FAQs, but because there was a sense, and it was inferred, I don't know that it was written anywhere, but that families could interchangeably go from distance learning to brick and mortar and vice versa. I love the flexibility, but I also think operationally that would be very challenging. And ironically, I think, absent a quarantine, I think we have to be somewhat cognizant. So is it my understanding that our goal is that, by what's the date, like start of school, the week before start of school, that we would encourage families to commit to those 9 weeks, of whatever decision they have chosen. Certainly if there was a quarantine responsibility, we're working to be prepared to do that distance learning if they were brick and mortar. And in the event they want to switch, we will do the best we can to work with them, but can't guarantee. Is there a date? Do we have any sense of a date? Because I think that would help tighten things up and provide clarity.
I think our hope was the choices that the parents made in the survey was their choice and what they would commit to. I mean, it's not that they're going to get another, I'm going to choose again. And if they have an idea that they want to change, they have to work with their school. And again, if they are starting out remote and they decide after 2 weeks it's not working and then they contact the school has to be given an opportunity. So it may not be the next day you're coming in to the brick and mortar, because they have to have an opportunity to work through the classes and where the kids are. And so it's as soon as we can accommodate their wish or desire, but it may not be the next day. I mean, they have to have an opportunity they may have to rearrange kids, especially if we're at class size across, which is what we really want to get to, because that's the way to save the most money, is not overstaffed. So there is a time frame with which they may have to wait in order to exercise their change of venue, I guess you could call it, whether you're working remotely or in the school. But it was our hope that they are giving us the response that that's how they want to start August 31st. And the ones that they haven't received a response to, they're going to try to contact to get what their choice or option is.
Okay, I think
they can staff.
That might need to be clarified, because I believe, particularly as we were in the survey 1, survey 2 updated, and then amidst the rising numbers, and the best, it was is intended to directionally staff, which I know the purpose. And then if someone were to change, you can't guarantee that if we've staffed with the best predictive information we can. But
with
to make
the schedule, it wasn't really to staff. The staffing's already occurred. It's to schedule the students into classes.
Okay. But again, I think that might need to be clarified, because I am being very sensitive to our principals, because I know they're working diligently, and now it's being, each school will have families reach out. But if that is, because there were a lot of questions, if I want to change this, can I think it was even told, even as a parent to me or such, that yes, we want to know what you think right now at this at this given time. If you were to change your mind a week before the start of school, you can contact your principal, et cetera.
Right.
Everything you said is correct. I think there might need to be a little clarity in there, and just to make sure that there isn't additional panic, which there already is. But I do think that may be a misunderstanding to a certain degree. And my worries was from the staffing standpoint of, if that's the case, even during the school year, the first couple of weeks, I mean, the back and forth, there really is more of a, families, this is your commitment to us, we'll work through it as we can, but I think that might need to be clarified.
Okay. I mean, I think that,
I understand the intent. I get it. But I'm sorry I apologize. I don't want to. The other item I want to talk about was capital, and from the budget standpoint, we have the CIP coming in front of us to be approved.
The normal 5-year capital improvement plan that we submit to the state.
When?
So I thought we did that.
I thought so too.
I'm getting the time frame. When was that? Because there's been some changes.
There have been a few changes. A month or two ago when we came.
I feel like it was in June, May.
It's hard to tell any time frame anymore. I get it. It all blurs together. Okay.
But
If you want to look at it, we certainly could bring it backwards.
Well, I mean, this is also including some of the projects. But my other question was including in here. Did we add any of the additional equipment? I don't know if there was a finalization on determination of, are we doing web cameras? Are we not? Is that reflected in this budget?
the cameras are in there. They're coming from Joe's current budget of technology, instructional technology.
Okay, and then one-to-one discussion, no, we didn't finalize it as a board. I know it was certainly discussed. Is that even included in a budget or a budget projection?
When we had the conversation on Tuesday, the thought was that we would look to philanthropy to help support that. There has been a bit of a pushback from philanthropy with regard to funding the computers based upon other capital funding decisions. We have some funding available within the technology budget to provide some devices. We have the devices from the last refresh that are still sitting in inventory, not all of which are in good working condition. But so again, it becomes a matter of, and it becomes a decision of the board, because now it's a little bit different in terms of now parents are making a choice. When you choose and you choice to a school, we don't provide transportation. If you choose or choice to remote learning, are we providing you with a computer? Are we providing you with internet service? When we did it in the spring semester, the spring quarter, it was, we gave you no choice. You had to shift and pivot, and you had to go to online learning, and if you didn't have the resources you needed, it was incumbent upon us, because we forced it upon you, to give you the resources you needed. So now it kind of becomes a decision of the board of how you want to do that, and to me, it really becomes a need-based type of discussion that we need to have, and so we have enough computers, I think, to meet the needs of the students that would need them currently who've made this choice. Whether we have enough, if everyone were to choose it and they needed a device, because this learning is very different from the ICANN plan of spring semester. You could do it at 6 o'clock at night.
Right. No, that's
This is during the school day. So you have 3 children, all 3 of your children are remote learning. You need to have 3 devices. They need to be in 3 different rooms or whatever it is to be participating in their classroom. So to me, that becomes the discussion philosophically on how we want to proceed with that. But there is money available in the budget. We always have the option to add to the the refresh program and lease the computers out. I mean, there's lots of options available to us.
Okay. I just wanted clarity if any of those discussions or items were, what was reflected in here. Thank you. I yield the floor. Thank you, Chair.
Are you sure about that? Well, one of the things I'd like to be clarified, which I didn't understand, is that there really are 4 options. It's brick and mortar, it's remote at the school, then it's Sarasota County virtual, then it's virtual.
Florida.
Virtual.
Florida Virtual is basically another
I know.
school district in the state. Yeah.
I got what it means, but I don't think that that's been projected out to the community.
I don't think there's a school district in the state that's advertised Florida Virtual as the virtual school option,
Right.
because you would prefer that they remain in your county with your teachers doing virtual instruction.
So I think that has to be emphasized more, so that, because I thought initially that if you went to Sarasota Virtual, you then would be able to go back into your choice program. But it wasn't so. It's if you do remote from your school that you can go back into your choice program.
Correct.
Not Sarasota County Virtual.
Correct, or any virtual.
I know, but I'm telling you, that's what I thought. So, I mean, I'm sure
If
that
it's
there are other people
available,
besides me that thinks that.
if it's available, you could possibly, but I don't know that would be the case.
No, parents want to be guaranteed.
Well,
The ones that I'm talking to want to be guaranteed. So if they want to go back into their choice program, their guarantee is to do remote from your school. Right, and that
Choice
has
is
to be
1 or 2.
really clear, that that's what they can do. Mrs. Brown?
Yeah, I've been coaching parents also that, we've got all kinds of safety protocols in place if they're going to be coming to school. But if you don't feel comfortable, go to the remote learning and, maybe, when the vaccines come on board in December, January, or the numbers drop, you can come back, and that's the easiest way. But following up on what Bridget said, we've got so many computers, but if we open up the schools, and as what many have predicted, that it just runs rampant, because now these kids who have been basically kept at home Now they're going back to school, and let's go to the mall afterwards, or let's go over across the street to Panera's and have some coffee. And that they start hanging out together outside of school without their masks, and it starts spreading again. And then we have to shut down our schools. And if we have to shut down our schools, we need that connectivity again. And where are those computers going to come from? Because we may have already gotten rid of them all.
No, they're coming from the schools. Right now, we have to have computers in our schools because we have students in our schools. And then, so if we move to 100% remote, we're taking the computers out of our schools and they're going home with the kids. So I think we'll be okay. I think we do need to purchase computers. But if the entire district goes back to what we had to do in the spring, the computers in our schools, that's where we're finding the issue now is we won't. If we're opening brick and mortar, those computers have to be in our schools. So we need to have computers for those who aren't in our schools. The issue, but if we all move to remote and we're only providing based upon need, I mean, it was only 20% of our students that ended up checking out a computer. It was a lot of computers, don't get me wrong, but 20% who accessed computers in our district, maybe a little bit more than that. So those are available in our schools currently. So we would be looking at that particular point at each school's tech support person to find us the computers.
The other thing that will have an impact on our budget, and that is the salary costs, because if we are going to, if an employee takes layoff, I mean, they have to pay for their own insurance, correct? We don't pay for their insurance while they're on
If they take a personal leave. Yes.
Leave.
Yes.
And, I've heard from some teachers who say, well, I've got other children and I can't find, I don't want to put them in daycare. And so I want to have virtual learning and I want to do the remote learning from home. And I'm like, you can't do the remote learning from home if you also have to be watching other things at home, either watching the baby, watching the mother-in-law who's recovering, or this and that. The remote learning is required. We have to give them X amount of hours in order to get paid. I mean, and I can understand that. The state says if you want your full funding, you have to give them the full educational experience. Mm-hmm. But we've got a lot of teachers or staff that also are saying, well, I don't want to come back because I have a, medically condition that would compromise. Will they be able to do the remote learning from home, or do they come into their classroom with no children and do it? Or are we giving them the option of the Sarasota virtual? I mean, how are we filling those spots? And I know we don't know all the answers yet.
Is that has to be negotiated, Mitzi?
We've had conversations with the union, and I think it's been on both sides that if you're teaching a class of 100% remote learners, you're still coming into your school. So you'll be in your classroom. You'll have use of your active panel to teach your classes and use that tool. You'll be able to collaborate with your peers and your teams. And so I don't think that the plan initially was that you would be working from home. Because, again, all you have is just your laptop to work on.
So basically, if we do remote learning, the state requires us or expects us to give the full educational experience.
Correct.
If we're paying a teacher, we expect the teacher to put in the hours.
Correct. And if an entire classroom had to quarantine, the entire classroom could switch to remote because the teacher has to be home. If they're asymptomatic or they're not positive, they're just having to quarantine, and they want to continue to work and those kids want to continue to learn, I don't see why they can't switch from a classroom-based instruction to a remote-based instruction from home during the time that they have to quarantine. Of course, if they become ill, it becomes a different scenario and we'd need to get a sub in. Hopefully we can find a sub, but...
And that works much easier in an elementary class when you get to middle school and high school where you've got one teacher for several classes. It gets more difficult.
Correct.
Well, isn't the part of the conversation that the teachers will do the switching of the classes and not the students?
There was conversation about that at the elementary level
Elementary.
for the specials and stuff. I've not heard that conversation at the high school level. I'm not sure that it's really possible
No,
because
it's harder, I think. It's really harder.
yeah, your classrooms are specialized and each student's schedule is different from the next student's schedule. So you can't say this class,
Well, and I think just like we have to have Plan A and Plan B if something comes up, or we've got those crisis response teams at our schools that will help organize this. But I think parents have to have a Plan A and Plan B too, just like now if their children get sick. We're going to try to accommodate as best as we can, but
No, agreed. And we'll keep having conversations with the union, and try to work through it as best we can.
but bottom line, if everybody keeps the mask on, we'll be fine. We should be.
Fingers crossed.
Somebody asked earlier what the number was, like 67% of our teachers, no, wait a minute, 67% of our parents want to come back to school, and they asked about what the percentage was. That was 24,355. That was the norm that was used. So of the 43,000 kids that we have, 24 of them have responded. That was on this chart that you gave us, Krista, or somebody gave it to us.
Right.
Mrs. Ziegler.
Sorry, lots of important questions. It's about the budget, though. So, but it is again, it's about budget and planning. We have, and I apologize if this is in my inbox because I know I'd asked, but I know there's a lot of emails still coming through. So I wanted to know. I know that we had put out for staff if they had, again, from a planning purpose, if they had intended to take a leave of absence, and that there was a time frame, and we have extended it, understandably so. One, has that closed? Two, do we have any? It is not closed.
No, it's not closed. It closed July 31st, so then we can provide you the information then.
So July 31st, and then we would have a number. Do we have any current?
I have no idea. I haven't had a conversation with Al to know the numbers that have requested at all. I have no idea.
Oh. Okay.
I would
Is it,
think if
like, is it a
was-
lot? I mean,
would think
operationally.
well, my
Okay,
guess is if it was substantial, I think we would have heard about it. So.
Okay. Thank you.
But I think some are still waiting to make that decision.
Understood. Thank you.
All
Because
right.
I'm aware, those actually show up on your personnel report. So I think I've only seen a couple recently. But they show, I mean, everybody who takes the leave shows up on your personnel report, so.
Yeah, and there hasn't been a
Aggregating
lot.
it, though, just to.
Oh, no, we will when we're done. We just,
Okay.
yes, we were going to give you that information. That's right, because it closes July 31st, so we figured if we could give it to you for, and discuss it on the 4th, at least we'd have more accurate information.
Okay, moving along. It's now the hearing of citizens. I have no cards, and I see no citizens in the audience other than
Hey.
our communication director and our COO. So we will move along from that. And next is item number 4. May I have a motion on that, please? Wait a minute, I have to, my page is stuck. Okay. Number 3,
I move that the following proposed millage rates for 2020 be accepted for advertising in accordance with the requirement of Chapter 200.065 of the Florida statute. General voted operating millage, 1 mil. General local required effort, 3.727. General local discretionary, 0.748. Capital outlay, 1.5. Total millage, 6.975.
may I have a second?
Second?
Under discussion? Please punch in so I know if you want to talk. Okay. All those in, I don't have a queue up, so all those in favor of
Yeah, why is it not coming up?
the following,
Aye.
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 and the chair votes aye. And the motion passes
Came up.
by
Just gotta refresh. Press refresh.
I heard you. Item number 4.
I recommend, no, it's 5 now, right?
Review of the approval of the tentative 2020-2021 budget for advertising. The advertisement is required by Florida statute and the language is restricted by law. Recommend that the tentative budget for 2020-2021 be approved for advertising as displayed in the enclosures that are listed.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Ziegler?
I'm sure you guys won't want to hear me talk anymore. I think there's a lot. I know there's been a tremendous amount of work in this budget. I know that there is a lot of unknowns, and I do believe that we can have items come back to us, and we will be able to adjust accordingly. I do have concerns. There are some items in the capital budget that I don't believe right now is the best path forward, given the uncertainty, as we just discussed, a lot of things. And for that reason, I won't be supporting it. Again, it's not any reflection of the work that your team has done. I think that we are facing unprecedented circumstances, and we'll have a lot of very tough decisions. Hopefully not that bad, but the part of me is where I believe there are some elements I just would prefer to see more conservative decisions made, and for that reason, I won't be supporting this.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Likewise, for any opposed?
Nay.
So the vote is 3-2 in favor of the motion. On the comments, the public hearing to adopt the tentative millage and the budget meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, July 28th at 5:15 p.m. We are adjourned from this meeting. Workshop. Okay, let's go right into the next one. Good afternoon. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the school board special meeting this Thursday, July 23rd, 2020. First would be the hearing of citizens. And again, there are no cards here and no one in the audience. So we will dispense with hearing of citizens. Under new business, may I have the under new business will be the contract for our new superintendent, Dr. Brennan Asplin.
I move the approval of the contract for Dr. Brennan Asplin as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'd like to hear some of the details of it before we vote.
Mr. Hardy?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This contract with Dr. Asplin is virtually identical to the format that you all saw at your board meeting when we discussed this. Some of the highlights of the contract, the biggest highlight, I believe, for Ms. Corcoran is that he will be commencing work here on August 10th, so we can all look forward to that. The contract runs through June 30, 2023, so it's just short of 3 years. The base salary will be $215,000, which is the midpoint of the range that was advertised by the board. He will have the opportunity in future years, starting in July 2021, to earn up to $15,000 in performance pay based on goals that the board sets for him. Otherwise, I think the provisions in here are pretty much the same that we discussed at some length at our last board meeting. If anyone has any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them. He will be getting the same sick leave and benefits, health insurance, those kind of benefits that other 12-month employees are getting.
Any discussion? Mrs. Brown?
I just want to iterate that $15,000 performance pay, that won't go onto a salary. I believe I'm reading that it's a bonus based upon performance.
That's correct. It does not become part of his base pay. It's available each year. tied to performance goals that the board and the superintendent will set together. I know in past times when this has been with our previous superintendent, the board set out 3 goals and put $5,000 each. You're not compelled to do that, but that was the way it was done that time. You could have 1 goal, you could have 15 goals. You could do it whichever way the board and the superintendent desire.
Well, I would just like to say I thank you very much, Mr. Hardy, for putting together a good contract and for working with our superintendent. I am very pleased that Dr. Asplin has accepted the contract as proposed and that he will be starting on August the 10th, because as he'll find out, we are pretty mean and lean at the top, and we need every person available to be able to work through this COVID and to work with the board. So it's really very heartening for me to be able to leave this board knowing that someone of Dr. Asplin's character will be coming on. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Any likewise? Any noes? Mrs. Goodwin?
Well, I just wanted to make an announcement of a couple of things. The first thing is that I wanted to suggest that we choose Ms. Shirley Brown as our advocacy committee member for FSBA, and I will follow as her alternate for next year. And so I guess we can vote on that, the 3 of us.
Okay. All those in favor of Shirley Brown serving as the representative to FSBA for advocacy and Mrs. Goodwin serving as the alternate, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any likewise for noes?
And I had one other thing I wanted to mention, please.
So is this a 5-0 or is it 3-2?
A 3-0,
We're not.
because they're not
You're not
voting.
members.
They're
That's
not
right.
members.
Sorry.
We're not members.
Okay.
And the other thing that I wanted to mention was that I did want to mention to the school community the letter that David Jones put out yesterday relative to one of his wonderful teachers at Sarasota High. It's with a very heavy heart that I write you. Our beloved teacher, Robert Shackelford, lost his life today in COVID-19. This was yesterday. So our prayers go out to his family, to the Sarasota High School sailors family, and it's just a really, really horrible time, and prayers and thoughts go with the family.
I would reiterate that, but I would ask Mrs. Corcoran to please respond. Was that COVID contracted here as a school, as a teacher?
No.
I know, but
No, it wasn't during his performance of his duties. He's on summer break right now.
so it happened off of campus and has nothing to do with the school system,
To my knowledge.
to your knowledge.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else to come before the board? Our next meeting will be August the 4th. Is that right? August the 4th. All right.
July
28th,
Yeah.
Madam Chair. 5:15, public
At
hearing to adopt.
5:15. We're adjourned.